But I want to switch gears to talking about Billy Bowman, who dropped his top 3 finalists for his services last night. Bowman is a high 4-star recruit, like just outside 5-star status here, who had been committed to Texas, but since decommitted from Texas and then named the top 3 that did not include Texas. They include Georgia, LSU, and Oklahoma for the dude from Denton Ryan, who plays both ways. Now, he projects his safety, but you'd be stupid not to use him like Jabril Cox was used at Michigan. You want to get him on the football field. He's got 10.84 laser 100-meter speed. He can fly. He's got tremendous hands. And going into this cycle, he is the number 5 overall player in the state of Texas. And y'all know that Texas puts out players. Texas, Georgia, California, Florida, those states put out talent. Even in a year where Washington is putting out 2 of the top 10 players in the country, Texas still contends with them player for player. Now, when I talked to the homie Colin Kennedy about Bowman, because Kennedy does a really great job of covering the state of Texas high school football. Matter of fact, during the Red River rivalry weekend, that man hit 4 high school football games. Okay? Keeps a very close eye on each one of these kids. And he's got tremendously high expectations for what Billy Bowman will be at the next level, regardless of where he goes. And if you're an Oklahoma fan, you got to feel really good about this. Because there is the gossip part of this where his girlfriend is on the OU softball team. I don't think that necessarily factors into where a dude goes to school, but then you talk to Kayla Kelly and you might get a different answer. I also think that Georgia has had a Paycom Jim Thorpe Award winner, in the last 20 years. I also know that when you talk about LSU, you talk about getting drafted defensively. Until last year, Oklahoma didn't have a defensive first-round selection for 10 years. Now Kenneth Murray Jr. has reset that clock. But you got to be able to show him you can develop him. LSU and Georgia can do that, and I think that's why they're on the list. But I think he's looking for a reason for Oklahoma to end up the place that he picks. So I'm going to be paying really close attention to what Billy Bowman decides to do. And knowing that nobody can take any visits, the FaceTimes, the Zoom calls become even more important, as do your win-loss records. Like, I don't think that Oklahoma makes this list if A, Texas doesn't suck, and 2, Oklahoma doesn't beat Texas in the Red River rivalry in a 4-overtime thriller that was awesome. I think all of those things work together to get Oklahoma on this list. And if Oklahoma is able to win out, I think they could win out with Billy Bowman. I think if you face some hiccups along the way, you leave an opening for LSU or Georgia. Difference here is Georgia needs a safety and has the space. LSU feels like a space for which Sage Ryan is just waiting and biding his time. But they're filling up pretty quick. And if they get a Sage Ryan, I'm not sure that they're going to take a Billy Bowman, though I would. You also need to factor in here, Oklahoma missed on Kendall Daniels or pulled the offer, depending on who you talk to. LSU missed on Kendall Daniels, and Clemson missed on Kendall Daniels. Now, Clemson filled their vacancy with Andrew Makuba, who is the teammate of one Latrell McCutcheon down there at LBJ in Austin. I think that at some point, Oklahoma is going to benefit because Oklahoma is the best of the rest. It's not where you want to recruit from. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. I'd like to think that Oklahoma's defensive turnaround might have something to do with that. But like as Alex Grinch said earlier this afternoon, Oklahoma's played great defense for very long stretches, but they've come apart in ways where it felt like they were looking at the scoreboard and then that was that. But they let him tell it, look, we're dangerously close to being called a good defense, and then we might mess around and end up there if we just put together some games. And Texas is a great example of that because the last 2 times that Oklahoma's played Texas, they've won, which means that Alex Grinch is undefeated against Texas. It also means that Oklahoma put together 14 sacks over the last 2 years of Sam Ehlinger and Herb Hand's offensive line, which is damning in and of itself. Because not everybody was kept after last year's 8-5 campaign by Tom Herman, but Herb Hand was one of them. It's another reason why Tom Herman is on the hot seat. You lose guys like Billy Bowman in the 2021 class, it ain't going to matter that you got to commit in Quinn Ewers in the 2022 class, which means that Quinn Ewers could be back on the market if there is no Tom Herman or Mike Yurcich over at Texas to keep him there. And we do know that Oklahoma was high on the list for Quinn Ewers, as was a place like Ohio State. All things to keep in mind and to keep close as we continue to talk about what he turns out to be or what he doesn't turn out to be, more to the point. So really, pay attention to Billy Bowman and what he decides to do. Pay attention to Texas high school football and how it continues to go. But more than that, LSU not being very good helps. Georgia being very good doesn't, if you're an Oklahoma fan, from that perspective. I'm not even sure there are many Georgia fans that acknowledge that Billy Bowman is a dude that they could get. I don't think they get that far out here, right? Like, every now and again, they go out to Arizona and get like a Keely Ringo. But I'm not sure that they're out here just acknowledging that this is a dude that they could go get. Otherwise, I think they'd be talking about him in a different way. This is weird. There's like 100 people watching and no person in the chat. Y'all got me thinking that the chat is broken. Wow. That's a first. All right. Well, we'll keep watching on that. So from there, I want to talk about Mason Smith and the 5 places that he has named as finalists for his services. So Mason Smith turned his focus to Alabama, Florida, LSU, Miami, and Georgia. Okay, Georgia making somebody else's finalist list. 6'5", 316 pounds. Just an absolute monster at defensive tackle. The number 19 overall prospect in the 21 class, number 3 at the defensive tackle position. And he went in depth with 247 sports analyst Steve Wiltfong about each one of these spaces. And I want to add some context to each one of these as we go. So in regard to Georgia, said, just the coaching staff, I talked to them a lot. They're really down-to-earth people, and they care. I like that in coaches. They have really good defenses every year. I know they don't put out defensive linemen that much, but that can definitely change, and they play great defense. You could do a hell of a lot worse to play defensive tackle at Georgia. Same thing with LSU, to which he said, that's the hometown school. Remember, he's from the state of Louisiana. The relationship is definitely there. I have great relationships. They've been recruiting me since I was in the 8th grade, and I have great relationships with them. I talked to Coach O on the phone yesterday, and those are my people. Before Coach Pelini got in there, I wasn't that excited about their defense because they were a lot of 3-man defenses, more of a linebacker defense. When he got there, that changed up.